For Creamer Media's Policy, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Many people believe that Women's Month is treated as a ritual and has little impact. What is your view?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are cynical about this. But let's start with the day that is designated as Women's Day, the 9th of August. It is the day of the March on Pretoria in 1956, when thousands of women descended there with petitions and claimed that Strydom got so scared he jumped through the window, ran away from them. Now it was a very important, very impressive demonstration of people of all communities. But I think it's important for us to understand, without devaluing that day, that there are a number of other demonstrations of the power of women before and after that. In 1913 in Bloemfontein, women marched down the street against threatened passes, claiming with a banner headed, "We are tired, we are done with pleading, we now demand." Now this is 1913, at the time when people criticized the ANC, saying that the ANC used to petition His Majesty, and these women were saying, "We are done with pleading." Now I don't think it was really a criticism of the menfolk, but there's also complexity attached to them. They were defying, but one woman was dancing wrapped in a Union Jack. So there's a mixture of symbolism attached to these things. A lot of the early protests were a mixture of loyalty to Britain, because it was believed that Britain, if you were a British subject, you would be treated equally. They had some illusions about it. And they invested in the Union Jack and the Crown certain hopes. There also were, apart from that, and other protests in Potchefstroom and other places before 1956, there were also others afterwards against the imposition of passes and other things in the 1950s. And what is interesting about this is that the chieftaincy is actually a patriarchal institution, but in some of these cases the chiefs united with women in resisting. In the northwest, in Dinokana, near Zeerust, Chief Abram Moilwa was told by the native commissioner that his wife must take out a pass. And his response was, "Who the hell is verwoerd?" And he was deposed. But what was interesting is that the chiefs united with the women in resisting the passes. Now it may be that there was a patriarchal reason, that they didn't believe that someone else could have any control over their wives and they alone had control. But I think it is a sign of the complexity that patriarchy doesn't mean one thing. But what I think is interesting about this Women's Day is that when I refer now to the role of chiefs, it highlights the fact that women's rights cannot be tackled by focusing on women alone, because the problem is a problem of patriarchy, of male relationships to women, either on a personal level or, more importantly, perhaps structurally, in various institutions, in marriage, in public institutions, in organs of state. There is an assumption of power being vested for decision making that affects women being vested in men. But there's also an assumption that various institutions are masculine institutions. For example, to illustrate this in a very bizarre way, when the first elections occurred in 1994, the first speaker elected after democracy was a woman, Freni Ginwala, and in her office she found a urinal because the assumption was that the occupant of the office of speaker would only be a man. And I think that was symbolically very important. Also in Parliament, there were hardly any toilets for women. So the women just took over some of the men's toilets over there. So institutionally, Parliament, police forces, militaries, all of these are really masculine institutions. Now that they have masculine character also means that when women come into these institutions, there are patterns of conduct which tend to be patriarchal. So if you're a woman, it doesn't mean that you will treat women any better than men have if you are in a position of power. And you have this phenomenon which one can call patriarchal women. So what we've got to really do is break down what we understand by the modes, cultural, institutional, and other modes of operation of patriarchy, so that we don't just go for numbers, how many women are in positions. We understand that we want women who empower other women, who enhance the status, the power, the confidence, the skills of women in society. So the focus of Women's Month, it's important that it should not just be on this event or the number of women who get into things, but also the transformation of power structures on the land, in marriages, in the homes, in institutions, in police stations. Also, the level of violence against women has to be addressed.
But why do you speak of the need to focus on men during Women's Month?
You see, if we're saying that patriarchy, it literally means the power of the head of the family, and the head of the family is a man. And we then have to ask ourselves, what can we do to transform these relationships, but also what can we do to transform the models of manhood and womanhood that we have in society? Now, manhood is particularly, masculinities are particularly important because all over the world, violence that is committed is primarily masculine violence. Not just in South Africa. If you look at the position in Australia, America, UK, it's mainly masculine violence, and it relates also to models of masculinity that we have, that you admire a person who is muscular, tough, who stands no nonsense, who may beat up sissies, and who may clobber his wife or his girlfriend, and whatever it happens to be. So we have got to establish in the minds of young boys as they grow up the idea that you can be morally strong and even physically strong, but to be gentle is also a good quality. And also, we have got to be prepared, I think, to show our vulnerability. You know, there's a sense that men must not show that they're vulnerable. They are invulnerable. They have no feelings of inadequacy, things like this. Now, I don't know if I was telling you this off camera the other day, but Ntombazana, Dr. Albertina Luthuli, describes how her father, before giving a speech, used to try it out on her mother, on Umama. And she her mother used to make comments and so forth. And afterwards she said, Ubaba felt confident to go and give his speech. And we're talking about the leader of the ANC, Nobel Prize winner, and the daughter is speaking about him being vulnerable, that only after his wife had been through the speech did he have the confidence to go and do it. And it tells us something about Luthuli as a gentle man who was prepared to have his daughters know that he could be vulnerable. You have stories the daughters tell of how he would be awake long after they went to sleep, and some of them would walk in their sleep, and he'd lead them very carefully back to their beds and things like that. So there's an image of, we've all got to have models who we admire, who in some ways we see as, and we say, that's what I want to be like. And I think we need to find more of those types and not the rough, tough types that you see smoking indoors at pubs, and if someone looks at them, they just give them a clap. That's the type of South Africanism that we've got to see an end to. And we've got to try and build this sense that gentleness is as important as strength. In fact, it's connected with strength.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's policy about women and men in Women's Month.